Hey everybody, welcome to another Machiavellian Monday here on Bully Whispers, and we are here today to dig into the question, how Machiavellian was Proposition Joe? As someone who's constantly scheming and playing people against each other, he would seem to fit the stereotype, but Machiavellianism is much more specific than just who's the best schemer and some general notion that the ends justify the means. The Prince is essentially a how-to-rule manual for current or aspiring leaders, detailing the most effective ways to deal with specific circumstances and different types of people based on Machiavelli's historical observations. So, how Machiavellian was Prop Joe? In evaluating this question, we will first take a look at his personality and the effects it may have had on his actions, before digging into the potential brilliance of his setup from a Machiavellian standpoint, as well as the combination of his faults listed in The Prince, which caused his downfall almost exactly how Machiavelli would have predicted. The first time we see East Side drug kingpin Prop Joe is at a basketball game against his rival, West Side kingpin Avon Barksdale.
Hey, yo, what's up, Playboy? How come you wearing that suit, B? For real, it's 85 fucking degrees out here and you trying to be like Pat Riley.
Man, look the part, be the part, motherfucker.
Where do you recruit your coaches from, the Wu-Tang Clan?
Actually, that's his nephew Cheese, but this is the perfect introduction to Prop Joe because he's seen taking a coach, mentor type role throughout the series with Stringer and Marlowe. But even more than that, this interaction shows us the two aspects of his character from a Machiavellian standpoint that explain his attempted courses of action, most notably the formation of the co-op, as well as an amazing bit of foreshadowing by Avon.
Nigga, please, you walking around with a fake fucking clipboard. You can't even read a playbook. Be for real.
But we'll get to that at the end. Machiavelli describes 3 levels of intellect, and he clearly doesn't belong in the third or lowest group, which is incapable of understanding anything. In this scene, we see that he is clearly capable of outsmarting his rivals, and as the series progresses, we come to see how smart he really is. But we also see in this scene that he is willing to forego some level of situational awareness, by wearing a suit in the heat, in order to help perpetuate an illusion, which in this case is him being a coach. We also see that Prop Joe is rather timid relative to his rivals, at least in terms of direct confrontation, and Machiavelli expresses that it is better to be bold than cautious because, with a few exceptions, good fortune is like a woman, a lover of men with the audacity to command her. Now, it's important to note here that Joe did ride those few exceptions like a champion, but at the end of the day he was still timid relative to his competition. This ability to outsmart, combined with his lack of a stomach for direct confrontation, would explain why he leaned into playing the role of the fox so heavily. According to Machiavelli, a good leader is like a lion and a fox, with the fox being crafty and able to avoid traps, while the lion is strong enough to scare away the wolves. We first really see him leaning into the role of a fox with Stringer Bell while Avon is in jail. He sells Stringer on the Machiavellian principle that if too much force is needed to control an area, it becomes more of a burden than a benefit. But as much as he pushes the buy for $1, sell for $2 pure business aspect, he lets his true intentions out briefly in the beginning.
Y'all got the best territory and no kind of products. I got the best product, but could stand a little more territory.
If it was strictly a matter of buy for 1, sell for 2, then why would he need Avon's corners? He could just sell for 2 to Stringer from where he is, which would actually go better with his fly under the radar strategy, but the truth was that he wanted to conquer. He just lacked the ferocity of the other lions. In this instance, however, he didn't need it. He was such a good fox that he acquired the corners without force, essentially getting Stringer to pay him to do so because you know he's not selling to Stringer at cost, and even has Stringer thankful that he did so. So at this point, not only do we know that he's an effective manipulator who lacks either the will and or muscle for direct confrontation, but also that he wants to expand geographically as much as a traditional gangster like Marlowe or Avon despite what he says. With that in mind, his strategy of forming the co-op to expand his influence could have, and I emphasize could have, been a stroke of Machiavellian genius. According to Machiavelli, a kingdom where everything is based on the blessings of a prince, which would be the true setup of the co-op since they all needed his blessing in the form of his connection, are harder to conquer but easier to hold. The reason being, it's harder to actually get at the prince, but once you replace him, everyone needs you the way they needed him. But what if the prince didn't have the muscle to actually be hard to get? The flip side to that point is that kingdoms ran by aristocracies, which is what all of the members of the co-op viewed it as, are easier to conquer but harder to hold because it only takes one disgruntled noble to gain access to the prince, but once the act is done, the conspirators have to face retribution from other nobles. So as a singular prince, who is not hard to get to, Prop Joe's idea of creating the illusion of an aristocracy that might retaliate was a brilliant idea. He indulges their illusions of having influence in making decisions, such as Stringer Bell's threatened exile, but he knows that he's the singular prince and passively flexes that muscle when decisions don't go his way. He had essentially become a fox who had tricked lions into scaring away the wolves for him. Unfortunately for Prop Joe, his primary motivation behind forming the co-op was very un-Machiavellian, as the prince states that war is not to be avoided, only postponed for benefit, and he was trying to avoid war, period. In light of this, Machiavelli would have easily predicted his downfall, saying that when princes think of ease more than arms, they lose their state. This emphasis on ease would taint the way he ran the co-op, and combined with the lack of situational awareness, would end up bringing about his downfall via Marlowe Stanfield. His initial attempt to get Marlowe to join despite declining Stringer's invitation is understandable, since by the end Stringer was basically a bargain basement Prop Joe, and the real Prop Joe would have every reason to believe he would be more successful. However, in this meeting, it becomes obvious that Marlowe is unwilling to buy into one key aspect which is essential for the illusion he created with the co-op to actually work.
The point of the co-op is we stand together. We share information, and no one fucks with any of us.
No one fucks with me now.
According to Machiavelli, a prince must let it be known that he cherishes his people, but also that they cannot stand alone, and this is the dynamic that enables trust. Marlowe showed clearly in that moment that he would never truly accept his end of that dynamic. At this point, Prop Joe can either drop it or continue to pursue Marlowe. From a Machiavellian standpoint, he should have dropped Marlowe, and we will get to why in a second, but he decided to continue his pursuit. Now, credit be given where credit is due, his strategy for convincing Marlowe to join was very Machiavellian. He created an enemy for them with Omar and then used those losses to bring Marlowe closer, eventually getting him to join the co-op. That being said, he never should have pursued Marlowe due to the reason behind his resistance. According to the prince, someone who resists because they are courageous should be allowed to live, because if you can get them on your side, you've gained a courageous ally. But if the reason for their resistance is ambition, then their motives can never be trusted. Someone like Bodhi would be a good example of the first type. He wasn't particularly expansionist, and he was brave enough to stand up to a superior force. Whereas Marlowe was aggressively expansionist, which Prop Joe should have seen during the Barksdale-Stanfield War, and it's here that his lack of situational awareness begins to come into play, putting him on the wrong side of possibly the most famous Machiavellian question of all: is it better to be loved or feared? Prop Joe had always leaned towards the side of being loved, and Machiavelli said it is good to be both, but it's better to be viewed as cruel than as someone who, through mercy, allows chaos to arrive, stressing that this grows more important the larger the army gets. Machiavelli concludes essentially that it is better to be feared than loved because while you can't make people love you, you can make them fear you, and Prop Joe learns that first part from Marlowe.
But I treated you like a son.
I wasn't made to play the son.
But here's the thing, Prop Joe could never make people fear him. Certainly not the likes of people like Marlowe or Avon. They only feared the loss of his connection, and this is where his lack of situational awareness really catches up to him. Introducing Marlowe to the Greeks was stupid to begin with.
My connect had people there when the shit went down. If that's what you need to make you believe, you can hear it straight from him.
But Prop Joe felt confident that he would be fine because the Greeks liked dealing with him. Apparently, he was under the impression that international drug traffickers would sit on millions of dollars worth of heroin if he wasn't the one buying it.
Shit.
They're going to keep moving and selling their product, and by introducing Marlowe to them, Prop Joe eliminated his ability to be a singular prince capable of bestowing blessings, while also turning the co-op from an imaginary aristocracy that would protect him into the vehicle for access to the prince via one disgruntled noble created through leniency that Machiavelli said it would be. Now, it can be argued that the co-op still provided retribution when Slim killed Cheese, but notice how Marlowe came out just fine because they still needed the connection. The co-op was never the mafia-like system of balances that Prop Joe described it as. It was all just an illusion created by Joe to further his own ends, and he would have gotten away with it too if it weren't for those meddling Stanfields. Ultimately, Prop Joe held on to his slice of the pie for quite some time, and Machiavelli expressed that when princes of Italy have lost long-held states, it has been due to sloth, not misfortune. While it can be argued that Joe being sold out by his nephew was misfortune, I think a much stronger case can be made for this being a result of sloth. Joe had known Cheese was trouble for quite some time. From complaining about him to Sergei in Season 2 to the fight with Hungry Man towards the end, Cheese needed to be taken care of, but Joe took no action. Even in instances where Joe took action, such as with Marlowe, he chose the path of least resistance, so secure in the illusion he had created. Unfortunately for Prop Joe, in order for illusions to work, people must buy into them, and Marlowe wasn't fooled for a second. Joe had the potential to be a very effective leader from a Machiavellian standpoint if he had had just a little more lion in him. Even still, he was such a good fox that it almost made up for it. But the ultimate irony is that for as good as he was at scheming and playing people against each other, he still didn't see Marlowe coming. He was a coach that couldn't read a playbook. Well, as always, thanks for watching. Like, comment, subscribe, and I'll see you at the next score.